So you want to begin your technique studies and you're not sure where you want to start. Today we're going to look over the aspects of punching and how to use it with a basic study technique, starting with a general outline. Stay tuned, we'll talk about it. Welcome to Shihan's Dojo. I'm Shihan Marty Husband, and I'm here today to help you build your skills in your martial arts, or if you're wanting to know a little bit more about the martial arts, give you some more information. So if you're here for the first time and you want to build your skills and the knowledge in the martial arts, jab that subscribe button and punch that bell so we can notify you when we have a new video coming out. The question for today is, what techniques do you feel you need to study in order to enhance your martial arts skills? Let us know in the comments which ones you would like to cover, and that you might be able to help us all build upon our own styles in conversation. Now, before we get started, I hope you've seen my first intro to this, a study in technique, and basically sets up how we're going to start looking at techniques when we're starting to learn them here at Shihan's Dojo. This will help you get some idea where we're going to go with this series. If you haven't seen it, click the link, come back and start watching this video here. Let us cover today on how we start setting up the study for our punch. There are many things a person can do when studying their own techniques. I think when we get a lot of ideas that we need to understand, or the way the technique should go or be done, we need to find out how much more we need to learn. It really sounds simple to beginners because I think they're able to grasp things more easily since they're new to the process. So we have to actually think, what is a punch and what have we learned so far, to put it into our notes so we can create a basic outline. The first part of this outline we're going to cover today is basically the objectives, and there's 5 of those main ones that we're going to go through. And next week we'll take it even further by basically describing everything we need to do with this outline. The objectives we have to figure out here are what is going to allow us to test and begin to study what we need to expect from our techniques, as in we are with punching here. Let us start with the first objective, basically the ideals of what we're going to use with the upper body. First of all, how do we make a proper fist? Now, there are many different types of fists you can make. It's all dependent on the style you're in, but the basic fist is what we're going to talk about today. By basically creating a fist, you have to curl your pinky finger, then go straight to your ring finger, then your middle finger and your front finger, and then lapse your thumb over the top. This tightens your fist so that it will be compact enough that it won't hurt as much when you hit something, especially if you've not trained enough. There are other variations you can do with knuckles and that there, but we'll cover that another time. Next, we'll take a look at the actions, specifically the hip actions in the upper body. So we're basically assuming we're going to have torque coming from these hips in order to add to our centrifugal force to enhance the power of our punch. Now, this is assuming we will cover a little bit more on phasic positioning in the lower body when we get to that objective. The important thing to remember is that the hips start at a 45-degree angle facing forward. This is more than just a setup. It helps the body by keeping the front arm in forward for defense. Now, this could change depending on what style you're in, but for now we'll assume that the front hand is going to parry or block or whatever you need to do. We'll cover defense another time, but for now just understand that. The ending position will be at 90 degrees to the center of our body going forward. With the hip action, you also have to understand how the arm glides along the body, basically scraping, if you're starting from a classical position, to rub against the body as it moves outward. This helps us not to telegraph our punch by keeping our elbows in. There are many different locations we could start by putting our rear elbow down by our body, that when we're torquing, it can come from there, and it's a shorter distance, and you can actually deliver just as much power sometimes. And remember, the hands have to be pointed forward to the intended target. We will not debate the differences in these techniques at this point because there's too many different stylized ways of looking at things. Needless to say, if we're going to do a classic style, we need to start the fist at the hip and then scrape and follow through along the side of the body with that arm. We'll also make the assumption that you're only using your pointer knuckle and your middle index finger to contact of your target that you plan to launch your technique on. Sometimes punches have a last second twist to them, while others might corkscrew, or another one might go horizontal from the body. Others you might have to use are like a half punch, where you don't fully extend your arm out through the punch, that have to stop against the body before you can actually do a full extension. And you also have a hooking punch, which can come across in front of you, and is sometimes known as a right or a left cross, depending on which arm you're using. There are other variations that can be used and broken down, but suffice for now that we broke down the punches we need to discuss. In understanding the objectives, you also have to be aware of where your punch is going. In practice, one should focus the punches to the center of your body when the hips are at 90 degrees and the punch is at the level of your solar plexus. Many styles talk about center line and how to attack with it, and you have to use your center line as a supporting for your attacks when you use them. This is very important. We also have to understand when we're punching, what are the main muscle groups we are using and controlling for our punches. In most cases, it'll be from your shoulder area to your armpit, or better yet, your deltoids and your pecs. These two main muscle groups are the source of your locking strength and your muscular control when actually applying the technique. In the final part of a physical objective, we need to understand the main physical principles of when there's an action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. This means we need to make sure when we're punching, we're pulling our lead hand back, say for blocking towards the head, or if you're in classical style doing basics, and that it'll go to your hip. Not a great place for self-defense, but you understand if you're in classical. This is just based on the dependency or the purpose of the technique you're studying. Now let's talk about the second objective of the lower body. These could be as lengthy as understanding the upper body, simply because they are just as much a part of the punch as the upper body. Now we'll assume everything's in a phasic position. So when I say phasic position, it's basically saying you have your legs bent and most of your weight over your main support leg, unless you're running a 50-50 stance. Whether it's from the rear or the front, the main front part of your knee, it should be in front of or directly over the base of the big toe. You see boxers do it, and you'll see most martial artists do it, and they'll call it basically the knee over the toe positioning. But phasic position is important so you can handle your balance and your movement effectively when trying to deliver your techniques. In understanding the lower body, one has to realize that their feet should at least be shoulder width apart, and the weight evenly distributed between the legs when possible for movement. In understanding the body, one should make sure that their feet separated, one more forward, one to the rear, with the front foot slightly pigeon-toed in. And being pigeon-toed in, it's not facing directly at the target, but in the general direction. More of a little angle to help you move in, and a little bit of an angle to help you with your mobility factors that you need to understand. That base of the toe needs to be held at all points. The front foot should always remain at least over the base of the toe, unless you're using a back stance, and we'll cover the rear foot in a second here. But if you're leading in a lead stance, that front knee should be over there so you're not easily swept or taken down. The rear foot itself should be pointing straight towards the target as much as possible. Depending on how you do it, you can have the heel to the ground or be up on your rear toe so you can move back and forth or help you shift. In this situation, we'll talk about the heel being to the ground. The heel is the driving force into the ground. As an over-exaggeration, we'll use a motorcycle to think about here for a second. When you're trying to kickstart an old-fashioned motorcycle without a starter. The thrusting action, as I said, is over-exaggerated, but it penetrates into the ground kind of like you would be when you kickstart that motorcycle. Next and finally, for this lower part of the objective, proof of stance. Now, we talked about the knee over the toe there, but proof of stance is so much more than just keeping a phasic position. When you're transitioning, you have to make sure your height doesn't change, that your body doesn't telegraph with your stance or any movements that you might do. Too often people do not understand that the proof of stance is probably as important as any of the technique in order to control better finalized technique and distanciating the proper transitions that come with using these techniques. I have a video on proof of stance right up here if you want to go see it. It explains a little bit about it, and it's an intro to it, so I'd highly recommend if you get a chance to go out and review it. But I would suggest you check it out so you can have an understanding of the basic concepts of the proof of stance. So now that we understand the physical objectives, we have to now go into the mental objectives that will be needed in order to study our technique. We'll just cover a few here because there's a lot depending on how you study and what type of fighting you're doing. The first and most important thing is understanding the proper relaxation that needs to be done when you're training and fighting. Your muscles should have a relaxed feeling, especially through inhaling and exhaling. When you connect that exhale, then you'll be locking your body, say from your hara or wherever. Understanding the moment of contact also allows you to understand when you need to contract your body through that exhalation that you'll be doing. Relaxation needs to be always maintained until the point of contact. It's a very important concept that needs to be adhered to when training or fighting. Also, on your mental objectives, you have to have your mind focused exactly on what you're trying to accomplish. You have to make sure you're getting that focus to the center of your body and the attack center, as well as training the mind to understand and be able to initiate what it needs to when it's working. So this is basically called mind weapon focus. You probably heard of this in Japanese styles as kime. It's very important that you understand how to focus your mind in the attack using your body and the point of focus that you're actually going to use. There's another aspect that's looked into that the Japanese call ZANCHIN, but it's basically just a follow through. I just want you to be aware of what it is. Now that we have the physical and mental objectives down, let us talk about the action objectives. Action objectives have to be broken down into two categories: the starting position and the ending position. There should be a middle category between them, but those will be handled more with the descriptions and comments that we'll do in the next video. So let's understand the starting position of our punch to see where the basic positioning is. We have to make sure that the rear leg is bent and that the knee is over the base of the toe for the front foot, or switched if you are using a back stance of some type. Make sure the arms and shoulders are 45 degrees as well as the hips, and the elbows are gently resting near or against your body. Now, I wouldn't suggest putting them against your body, but the rear hand could be against your body and the front hand out slightly. I'd say at least a fist and a quarter away from your body. The rear leg being bent was what we talked about earlier with having where we have the rear foot pointing forward as much as possible, but it's only slightly bent, not like you're dropping to the ground or getting low or anything like that. Your ab muscles and your glutes are slightly tensed so you can maintain your basic position and the proof of stance that you're in. Depending on what you're trying to do, the rear elbow can be slightly against the body and a loose fist being held, making sure that these fists are pointing forward towards your targets. That means the front hand should be pointing towards the opponent or the target in case you need to jab or parry with it, and the rear hand should be pointing to the main target that you want to attack. Now, we're not going to talk about change up speed or anything like that right now, but know this: just because it's pointing there doesn't mean it has to necessarily be delivered there. As I tell my students, if you have a weapon, you wouldn't point it in the opposite direction if you're going to use it, because the shortest distance is between 2 points. Your leg being bent in the rear and the front helps you to spring load that technique in a moment's notice without much thought. Now, let us understand the last part of this action objective, in that we're at the point of contact in delivering the punch to the target. When the punch reaches its conclusion, the rear leg then straightens out and the knee position for the phasic position goes over the edge of the toe or very near the edge of the toe. You have to make sure there's no hyperextension with that rear leg. You still want to keep it just slightly bent with that knee facing forward so you can move back quickly if need be. As I mentioned earlier, the hips will be ending at a 90-degree position off the center of your body at the level of your solar plexus. There should be a weight transition or a sinking feeling as that punch goes through, with the hips feeling like they're going down at like a 35 to 45 degree angle towards the ground. The tension from the leg should only lock for a split second, then be able to spring back for a parry or an attack if need be. Now that we've discussed the main objectives of the reverse punch, we'll be able to start to set up our general descriptions, figure out common errors we might have, and add any other notes or comments that we might feel necessary to perform a proper punch. My suggestion today is take what you heard in this outline study we did today, write it down in a way that's good for you so that you can understand for yourself by using your own system that you're creating. In the next video, we'll go into these descriptions using scientific principles to help us understand what we're trying to accomplish, find out what we can do wrong and cause loss of power or whatever, and just enough to take the time to see what's effective by analyzing these techniques to better build on our foundation. I would have done this all in one video, but there was too much information, so I thought I'd bring it out this way and then finish up the reverse punch in the next video so you can have the information all together. We also plan on having other videos in the future on parrying, kicks, how to use them, throws, basics, ideas, principles, but I think in the next few weeks I'll be setting up a front kick and the actions and studies that need to be done for it. I hope this helped you to understand what goes into the introduction of a study of a technique. However, as with all studies, they should be built upon and find the things that are missing that you didn't think about. This study will not be complete in any way, shape, or form. As a matter of fact, there might be a few things you can't use or understand in here, or could add to it. Let us know in the comments down there. We'd love to have discussions on things that need to be added or bettered when we're trying to learn how to do a technique. If you like this video, press like down there and share it with your friends so we can help Shihan's Dojo grow. Don't hesitate to ask questions. I'll try to answer them as quickly as possible and best I can. Don't forget the question of the day. What techniques do you feel you should understand to better your own martial arts? Let us know down there also. And I hope to see you again here on Shihan's Dojo.